So it's Monday, March 9th, 2026, and I'll call to order the City of Burlington's Board of Finance meeting. Our first item is the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda? Moved by Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Onto our public forum. It's the practice of the Board of Finance to first go to members of the public in the room. Then we will go online for anyone to address us on matters related to Board of Finance. I see nothing but hard-working city staff in the room, although none of them are coming up for public forum. They're allowed that too. So I will go online and see if anyone here is online. And former City Councilor Sharon Busher, welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon. Good, beautiful afternoon as far as the temperature. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to speak to your last item on the deliberative, which is the budget presentation. And I wish I had a silver bullet, but I don't. I see that the gap is still pretty much the same for FY27 budget, so there's still that shortfall, although you have achieved 3 million of that, as you all know, from the police and fire tax and support from the public. I guess that when I'm looking at everything that has been done, I'm just saying, as a resident, looking at what I see the city do and what I see the city not able to do, I just want to say that, to me, I'm sure you're doing this behind the scenes, but I want to make sure that, you know, sometimes you look at the overall budget and you look at programs and look at the viability of programs. But I think we're beyond most of that because we've trimmed that down. Now, for me, I look at the programs and what actually is funded and what is needed to be done versus what we want to do. And so to me, that is where I look now to see if we can have some significant savings. And it's not in the long term because you would have to prioritize and potentially phase in and do less because of the restriction in our finances. So I've looked at that and I continue to get concerned about it. I'm concerned also about overtime when people are working weekends or evenings or nights. Is that absolutely necessary? Obviously for public safety it is, but this is the level I'm at. And you know, I muck around in the weeds all the time, so this is not new for me. But I just want to say, when I talk about what we can afford versus what we need, the we is really the renter, the lower income resident who is trying to be supportive and make our community vibrant and safe, but realizing that we have to make difficult choices. So I do have some specific ideas. I don't think it's my place to share them at this point, but I do have some specific ideas. And I'm hoping that after this meeting, there'll be more information about what has been looked at and shelved because it's not a viable option and what still has value and might be considered. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else online who'd like to address Board of Finance? I'm seeing only city staff. So with that, I'm going to close public forum and we'll move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Barlow. Thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And our first deliberative item, item 12.1, which is our Department of Public Works and authorization to execute SS 4A.
Safe streets for all.
Thank you. That sounds right.
This has been time in the comment.
So my name is Parsa to start, and I'm here with Philip and Jackie on this island.
Yeah, so Philip Peterson with Public Works, Senior Transportation Engineer and Planner. Full teams here, Laura Wheelock, City Engineers here as well. So I'm going to walk you through the Safe Streets for All Planning and Demonstration Grant and hope that my dog doesn't interrupt us. And the actions we're requesting from the board today. So we'll start with that. What we're asking for is authorize the Director of Public Works to accept and execute the Safe Streets for All grant agreement, and also to authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to make necessary budget amendments and transfers to establish a project budget. So just to kind of walk through what is the purpose of the grant, the Safe Streets for All award allows Burlington to kind of modernize and coordinate a critical set of signalized intersections along main streets. It will hopefully improve safety, reduce conflicts, support more reliable multimodal operations along one of the city's most heavily used, if not the most heavily used corridor. This work also prepares the corridor for the 2027 Winooski River Bridge detour when traffic volumes will inevitably increase. In terms of project delivery, this will be a coordinated effort between tech services. We're going to manage the demonstration project. So we're going to document baseline conditions. We're already poised to do data collection efforts, monitor performance during the demonstration, and then produce a final report with recommendations. And parking and traffic, which will procure and install the equipment. So some timeline. This has been kind of an interesting grant to work through. The federal performance period is already established. We've already met NEPA requirements. We met those last June. We have a NEPA authorization. Phase 1 closeout is April 1st. So it requires a fully executed agreement, which is pretty much the final step before we can get into the next phase, which is construction. But we do have plenty of time to get construction complete. Valuation kind of runs through July of 2029, and a final report is due in October of 2030. So the total project budget is $1.4 million approximately, with $1.2 million-ish in federal Safe Streets for All funds and $294,000 in local match, covered by the traffic fund through a combination of funding and in-kind work, and Jackie can probably walk you a little bit more through that. So some final note on kind of some timing and scope adjustment. I want to briefly acknowledge why this agreement is arriving now. This award was a while ago, and basically, without getting in too far into the details, a change in federal leadership at the Department of Transportation kind of triggered a re-review of several Safe Streets for All agreements nationwide, and it kind of required an adjustment to our original scope. Specifically, we had to remove the equity index tool component, which was not something that we wanted to do, but it was something that we had to pivot and to get the agreement taken care of. Fortunately, during this pivot time period, Local Motion, in partnership with DPW and with the REIB office and the city, submitted a proposal last week to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Local Data for Equitable Communities grant, which is also an equity index tool that will be created. So that's Local Motion is the lead applicant. So while that component is no longer part of the Safe Streets for All grant agreement, I did want to at least acknowledge it if this is if folks are familiar with the history of this grant. So with that, I will stop talking and can answer questions.
Okay, Bill, do you have anything to add here in the room? Thanks for being here. Questions or comments from the board? Councilor Carpenter.
I can't quite wrap my head around the scope of this, but how will this affect residential neighborhoods? I see the streets, but other than Willard, has there been contact with the residential neighbors?
There was a robust public engagement period. This project, how it will affect the local neighborhoods is it will increase the efficiency of intersections along Main Street, from Willard to the Jug Handle, basically. So what we're doing essentially is we're smartening up each of the intersections. They're getting upgraded controllers, myovision camera system detection, which will, a lot of those intersections are, well, they're all just timed. So they don't have the intelligence built into the intersections. But we'll be able to respond quicker. The intersections will be connected, and hopefully that'll, it should, and that's why we will collect data, increase efficiency, safety along those intersections.
So it's all lighting, it's not like East Avenue, it's not barriers or configuration changes or things
Nothing
it's
like,
all the lighting, lighting.
yeah, we're upgrading the traffic controllers and the traffic control system, and there's no reconfiguration for bike lanes or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Councilor Barlow?
Yes, thank you. It's termed a demonstration that this is envisioned to be permanent, right?
Yes, the equipment will be permanent.
Right. And the local match, the 294,000 local match traffic fund, is that in the FY26 budget or anticipated to be in the FY27 budget?
So I believe I put 120 in FY27, and then we have the cash on hand to do it, but I'll spread it out between 27, 28, and 29.
That's all I have.
Councilor, anything else? Or I see there's a motion. Councilor Travis.
A couple of things. First of all, I want to publicly apologize to Jackie, as I've been emailing her to let her know that my 8-year-old is not coming into school sick. So, because his teacher is a Miss Jackie, and misdirecting everything. So apologies for that. Thank you for good support on this. Second, I want to thank Jackie for getting back. I did have one question around the fact that one of these signals is actually in South Burlington. And I appreciated you all getting back and noting that you did clarify that we reached out to our friends in South Burlington to see if they wanted to contribute here. I understand that the equipment that is actually being changed here for the most part is our equipment. Some of the equipment is South Burlington's, but ultimately it's our responsibility. So I understand that. If there was room for us to ask South Burlington to chip in, thank you. I do have one follow-up question on that, though, which is that, and it goes to what Philip was saying here. I mean, obviously, that road continues, right? There's a signal beyond Staples Plaza, which has its own backup and traffic challenges as well. Is there any coordination that we anticipate going on with South Burlington to continue these smarter intersections moving forward? I guess I have some concern that we do everything up to Staples Plaza, which is great for folks that are getting onto 89 there, but you keep going and folks just end up with the same old backlog that they have right now along Wilson Road. So just curious of the future.
Yeah, and they just recently upgraded those intersections. I guess that's maybe a year or two now, but South Burlington upgraded on the other side, on their side of the bridge. We will work with them. We've been chatting and know that this is happening. We met with them last year, maybe 2 years ago, when we originally applied for this grant and received the okay to move forward. So yes, we will coordinate as best we can.
We have other projects with South Burlington as well. As stakeholders, the Main Street multimodal study, we have focus groups for that study starting within the next couple of weeks, actually. And we also have the Exit 14 study and other projects that are not even peripherally related. I mean, they're directly related to this work. And so we do meet with South Burlington folks and discuss these things. Yep.
And Jackie, did you have anything else to finish?
Oh.
And sorry, so I plan on supporting this. I just do have one additional follow-up question, which is, I do know, as Philip just mentioned there, that there is, or what the proper term is, if it's a scoping study or if it's the multimodal study or what have you, right? So I know that that's ongoing. And I guess what I would not want to see happen here, right, is for us to expend these monies only for that group to come up with additional suggestions as to how we can reconfigure the junction or the intersection and so on, only for us to, in the next few years, completely undo the work that we're putting significant monies towards now to the end of improved safety features down the line. So I guess my question is just how does this mesh with that work, and can you offer any sort of feedback commitments as to this being lasting and it actually meshing, to use the term again, with the work that's ongoing in Platform?
So even if we completely change the intersections, the items that we're purchasing can be moved. The cabinets, the actual lights, all of that can be moved if we decide. I don't think there's any plans for that, but when we do when the Winooski Bridge project starts, we're going to have a lot more traffic in this area, and the detection will be able to assist with that.
And I would say that this would be a complement. Actually, the data that we collect from these would be a very good help for that study too, because you're counting cars, it's also a data collection sort of project, which would be very good support for that study. Right. Thank you.
Big agenda to pick someone to speak or present. So if there is a motion, I would entertain such.
I would move the two actions on civic clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Barlow. Any discussion on the motion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, team. Jackie, it's in your stay. Our next item is item 4.2, which is part-time service agent hearing, also with Department of Public Works.
Yes, I'll just introduce this and say, Jacob Spencer, Director of Public Works, that DPW has been on the forefront of looking at tiering as a exemplary way to build retention strategies and to ensure a high-performing team. This follows after your approval of tiering in street maintenance and in water and wastewater. So, take it away, Jackie.
So currently we have 10 partner service positions, 8 full-time, 2 part-time. They are about city writing, safety and equity violations, we are looking to tier them. Currently, all of them are grade 11, looking to tier them to grade 12. Our estimated additional cost is around $15,000 per year if half of the books go to the second tier. With this, we are planning, with this approval, we're planning to purchase license plate optical character recognition technology, so camera-mounted enforcement, which is just an upgraded level of training for our public service agents, which is where this all scoped from. With that technology, we're hoping to increase $50,000 to $100,000 is our estimate for that technology. So this tiering is new revenue, yes. Tiering is definitely going to be covered by that. With that technology, we also are going to have some new permit options, like punch card options for the garages, which we're excited about. It's been a few years in the making.
Jackie, questions or comments from the board? Right, is there a motion? You civic clerk on this one. It's a lot of I'm not surprised. It's a lot of very specific and important technical information here. Councilor Barlow.
I'll make the motion that's recommended on city.
Great. And I believe there is just one action within that motion. So that's our position. Okay. So there's a motion by Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Big shout out to HR and Tony Berry, who was very helpful. Thanks.
And I just saw you, Tony. Thank you for being on, Tony. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to item 4.3, which is a title change and downward reclassification of a Special Assistance and Homelessness in the CEDO department, and our CEDO director. Well, today, Ron PD, you're playing the CEDO director this next little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, it's here.
This is taking currently a vacant position, the position that Sarah Russell had held in the city. And before posting it, again, we did a review. Some of the change in the stance around this position is the city is moving away from being a direct service provider, which we had been the last couple winters. And so that's some of the main change in the role. That ended up reclassifying the role downward. And so I'm coming here to ask to have this moved from a grade 21 to a grade 20 before I post it.
Thank you, Cara. Questions and comments from the board? So far.
And thank you, and I appreciate the downgrade. You know, this is one where some of the responsibility has been shifted to the nonprofits, it sounds like.
Some.
The Continuum of Care grant went to.
Well, it's not fully moved over, but yes, correct.
And I'm just wondering, as we look at, you know, closing this budget gap, it's still significant. We're wondering what services the city can continue to provide and what things we need to look to other partners to provide. I'm just wondering, especially since this one's not filled right now, what's the calculus is there on this, I guess?
Yeah, you're asking me to get into a larger conversation, which I don't think this is the right forum for, around my budget cut proposals that I've submitted to the CAO and to the mayor. In terms of this position though, with the amount of emails and public outreach regarding our homelessness population, with the need to coordinate between our service providers. For example, I feel it's very important that we have more low barrier options in our city, and we don't, and we are nudging service providers to keep that in mind when they open new services. In addition, for example, the meeting that you would like to have coming up regarding some of our houseless individuals, we need a coordinating role for that. We also have a weekly internal meeting called Safe Outdoor Spaces, and we will need someone who will be applying for and distributing other grants that only municipalities can apply for homelessness response.
And currently in Sarah Russell's absence, and she's left.
I have someone working double duty right now, who can't continue to do that at this time. There was a delay in bringing this forth since Sarah left, just because my role has been complicated recently in the city, and also wanting to get it right. Understanding that the Continuum of Care grant is most likely moving to an external party, but also trying to understand what it means for us to be trying to provide a convening role for the community and be involved in everything from the launch of our OPC to the situation table, which we've had good success with, and running the Safe Outdoor Sites meeting.
To add a little bit too, because it is in the memo, but I really want to emphasize homelessness and public health issues, such as mental health and substance use response. So Sarah was really, it was a position that had the largest jobs I've seen in my life in terms of the wide scope, because it was a first-time role that was created when Sarah came into the city. And this is a really strategic look at what the complexities are that are remaining, the things that we can't necessarily and shouldn't as a city just sort of offboard off to a nonprofit. And I think we've gotten so much clearer within CEDO in these last several months since all their reconfiguration and reorganization. And this is a very smart fill of what we need in terms of appropriate policy, appropriate coordination, as Carl was mentioning. But this added evolution around the public health, this like trifecta of issues that I often talk about around homelessness, but also the co-occurring for many individuals, mental health and substance use. And as we continue to evolve our OPC work, but also all of the policy questions that remain at the state level, this is a critical need to hold with someone who's primarily just focused on that, both local, regional, and state. So I'm really excited about this, as well as the smart looking at like a reclass down to really reflect that we don't need this person also doing all the technical stuff that was mentioned. As you all know, Sarah's role was prior in charge of.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Further, Councilor
Have we
Carpenter.
received any revenue from the continuum of care grant?
No.
No.
We were a pass-through vehicle for that grant, and that grant is moving to an external party. The entire county was at risk of losing that grant if the city of Burlington remained the collaborative applicant. So in order to avoid being dropped by the federal government, had to transfer the grant. It's not fully transferred, but it's on its way out.
Is it, well, we can talk offline, I just could ask about the expectations of moving it, but I think we have to have a higher expectation, but that's a whole other conversation.
Comments or questions on this item?
The only other concern is there's a lot in this job description, and I really understand the need for it, but do you think you can get all this? A lot.
It is a lot. It's, I mean, I think the job description is a little wordy, whereas I don't think all of these tasks are everyday tasks. If a time, for example, they're moving legislation through Montpelier right now, we need someone to testify on our behalf as to the city's needs related to homelessness. That would be once a year, those sorts of things, yeah.
Anything further before I look for a motion on this? Councilor Travis.
Yeah, just a couple of points. First of all, I appreciate that with recent hats that you've been putting on here, Laura, and with Sarah's departure and such, that has not been perhaps as much time or lead up as we would have liked standing this up. You know, I became aware of our wanting to stand this position about last week, so it's left us a few weeks to figure out, at least at the council level, how it fits in. And I'm thankful for your taking some time here at the 11th hour to talk to us a bit more about it. You know, with so many amazing partners here locally, providing homelessness services here in Burlington, Chittenden County, I very much appreciate the direction in which you're going with sort of taking the city out of being a direct provider and are finding ways to be more complementary to the other service providers here locally. Of course, Sarah Russell is now very involved with one of those providers. And she, at the city level, was overall irreplaceable. But to the extent she was doing work in her role that has been replaced, it's been a little more than half a year or so now where it appears we have been able to do that. I know that some folks have perhaps been doing double duty and that staff are generally spread thin. But it does appear from my perspective that if we find the right efficiencies and go about this in the right way, that the tasks that we're looking for this job to take on should be doable within the city's sort of current actual head count, not FTE numbers, but the actual staff that we have in place right now. So while I will support our heading in the direction of this more refined position, I do just want to say out loud that it does appear to me that we are able to do this work, that we have been doing this work for the past 6-7 months or so. And as we enter into the budget season, I would hope and expect that whereas this position is being stood up or reclassified, that it may be otherwise reflected elsewhere in the budget process. The last thing that I just want to note is I also appreciate your finding ways to fund this by relying less on the Housing Trust Fund That said, I do think as a council, in coordination with your office, the mayor's office, that we should hopefully have a broader discussion about the best uses of those housing trust fund dollars. With standing up the dedicated short-term rental tax, that housing trust fund has expanded significantly in recent years. I have thought that perhaps those are monies that could be, in addition to supporting permanent affordable housing, that some of them could be used more directly to support the provision of homelessness services, not necessarily on the administrative side of things, but in the direct service area. And so I do question, while I appreciate the number going down here, whether or not this actually is the best possible use of housing trust funds in addressing the homelessness crisis. And we'll look forward to our continued discussion as to how else we may be able to tap into some of those funds to address this.
Yes, I appreciate that, yeah. I'm happy to speak further.
Councilor Carpenter.
Just in that same vein, I can appreciate the volume of asks, problems, things that pass through the email or on the phone related to the unhoused. It is unfortunate for me that we have to pay for that, but I also appreciate we're trying to figure that out, look to other sources. But kind of in that same vein, I'd also, and I hope you do this in your budget presentation, talk to us about what the housing positions are doing, because I'm not quite understanding how that relates. So I guess that I would, and particularly how it relates to the fact that we have such strong housing partners in this county, and there may be different needs.
Yeah, and I'm coming on the 23rd for the bill resolution to talk more about housing, and maybe I can add some meat to that bone as well.
Anything else on this particular item? All right, look for a motion. Okay, looking for a motion.
I will move what's written in, not civic clerk.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the recommended action is on civic clerk. Okay, is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Are those three different items that are three different actions, or they weren't?
To approve the each item and to see reading.
Oh, I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Wow, this is keeping us moving on to 70. We're going to move on to the next item. There are more items. There are more action items in the next item. Let me get on item 4.3.
Yes.
So it is just one item. Thank you, Councilor Carter. Seconded by Councilor Barlow. Any further discussion on item 4.4? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now moving on to item 4.4, a reclassification, slow down. I got coffee, sorry y'all. Reclassification request from our Burlington Police Department. So come on up, y'all. There's a few positions here related to our executive manager and assistant community support supervisor to crisis advocacy and prevention program, which is a manager position. Our chief.
Mayor, for the record, Sean Burke, serves as the interim chief of police. Police department is requesting 3 reclassification of the existing positions and then the elimination of a vacant position. I'll start with the changes and the reason or the rationale for the ask in our CAIP division. So over this past fiscal year, everyone's well aware that we have ended the CARES program. We also accepted reluctantly the resignation of our assistant director of the CAIP division, which also gave an opportunity to really assess the components that remained and have been identified as essential in our CAIP division. That is our community support liaisons, which when fully staffed, that's 6 total positions. And then also our domestic violence advocate, which is 1 position. We also have a sitting community service supervisor that was was simply overseeing the CSLs. We saw this as an opportunity to reclassify that, with your permission, to a manager position to then take over not only supervision of the domestic violence advocate, but more of a role of training, screening, and onboarding new employees in that unit. So to eliminate the assistant director position, that total compensation as budgeted for FY '27, which we're asking you to eliminate, was $168,000. And then it would be a 1 grade increase for the community service supervisor to community support manager position. Moving on to the changes that we're facing in the, or requesting change for in the business division. So in terms of the executive manager and the command assistant, those positions are occupied. These are two places where we had to put a lot of work that we ended up with post the reduction in force last year, namely the, to some extent, the IT position, but also the business manager, which is in large part the budget manager for the police department, and also our training and special projects manager. So what's really critical about the work that was left over from the training and projects manager was our compliance to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council in terms of our officer certifications. So post 2018, there's been a lot more rigor and statutory framework stood up around how we need to report and account for our training hours to the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council on an annual basis. And the supporting documents and fiscal investments need a lot of oversight and management. So the command assistant has taken on that work. In the absence of the business manager position, the executive manager has taken on budget oversight of the police department. It's not lost on anyone, and with great appreciation for me, that we are the largest general fund department in the city. We have a lot of, planned out of the box type police expenses, but we also have things like overtime and other expenditures that ebb and flow with operations, lack of staff, all the things that we've been facing here in the city of Burlington. And to put it frankly, to transition this police department to a permanent chief, I cannot stress the importance of having a person that can actually have a good handle on business operations, particularly the budget oversight of the department, because of all the things that you become pretty good at as a police officer, one of which you have to pick up over time is budget management. And I see this position as critical. So in terms of what we're requesting for those reclassifications would be on the executive manager from a grade 21 to a grade 22. And the command assistant is a grade 15 to a grade 16. In total, the increase that the department is seeking is about $18,250. We can, that's an annual cost. In FY26, we can easily recapture those funds through vacancy rate. And again, by removing the assistant director position from our proposed FY27 budget, we have significant savings in that regard. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Pretty good at budgeting. Don't sell yourself short.
Thank you.
All that experience. Questions on this item before? Councilor Carpenter.
I think I'm fine with it. My concern is by eliminating the assistant director position, which I'm also fine with, and I think lining up the CSLs and giving them as supervisors is the right move. And I'm really addressing this more big picture. We just suggested a homeless person in CEDA. We have the work of the CSLs, and I'm still concerned about kind of the big, we have the work the fire department's been doing on overdose prevention, that we don't have yet a bigger picture of these services, which, for lack of a better way, are more human service related versus, the CSLs have done a great job. They of course intervene in emergencies, but it's a different role. And as is the homeless job, is some of the work the fire department has. So I'm really expressing this as a comment and hope that this next year we can have a tighter vision for, it's hard to articulate to people. How does this all work? Entailed by, again, I know you're working on it, but the role of the CSLs doing work that the city shouldn't have to pay for. Bottom line. That's not really loose, but somehow gathering that and understanding it and articulating it better would be helpful.
Well, I'll start with an answer and then I'll Chief, but part of what we've really been hard at work in the last year is really formalizing and getting clear on what our roles and responsibilities across our community safety response, not just given within PPD. Although the chief did put a first-time real policy together this fall for clarity of role and responsibility and who responds to different types of calls related specifically to CSLs, but also CSOs I think too, for clarifying that in a minute. But also that the first-time Howard Center contract with street outreach, of course, getting clear on a number of public health related roles that have really popped up and grown over the last few years, but right sizing, and that's really the work we've been doing. And I think we're only going to get tighter to your comment and clearer, and be able to make a much more clear case to the region and the state about like what's really needed at the end of the day as we continue to grapple with these year after year budget gaps that we have been holding so much of what should really be resourced on a much more at least regional scale, if not state scale. And so I think we're well on our way of getting really disciplined on what we need to have on the ground here, because we also can't wait for the state to suddenly spring something up because they haven't shown evidence of doing that yet. And we have real-time needs that impact our downtown, the vitality of downtown, et cetera, that we have been very, I think, strategic and smart with our limited resources responding to. And we'll keep getting better at it, of course, and staffing up as we continue to rebuild the police department with police officers, which is our greatest need at the moment. Chief, do you want to add anything or clarify anything?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Mayor. And just quickly, I think we're a little ahead of the curve of maybe what I didn't lay out, in the sense that we recognized that the CARES program was something that really should be administered by, that work should be administered by the designated agency. So I believe that was very wise. And then taking the time to really review where we were and what we need in a response model, because a lot of this was built in the wake of a reduction in the police force. So aligning the CSLs under a leader, under the deputy chief of operations, is exactly how a police department can exercise this experiment, if you will, of relying on professional staff and the designated agency to do some of this work in the street for us. And that's why it was important that we designated actual calls for service in which these professionals can respond directly, so we then can look at the data to see, does it work or not? And if it's working, what else might they be able to do? Because, our police officer staff number is not impressive, and the recruitment landscape nationally does not have any of us overly optimistic.
Thanks, Jim. Other questions or comments on this item? Okay, Council Barlow.
We'll move the three-part function as recommended by Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Great. All right. Moving on to item 4.5, over to our airport. Seeing almost everybody today. Reclassification This is a reclassification of airport ambassador position. Welcome to the
All right, so another reclass for you tonight. Nick Longo, I'm the Director of Aviation. I'm with Marie Friedman, our Director of Finance, Jeff Bartley, our Director of Marketing and Innovation, and also the expert help of Orietta from Human Resources on this particular item. We are asking our ambassador teams to receive a reclassified grade 9, which is the lowest grade on a scale, to a grade 11. I'm sure all of you have ran into some of our ambassador teams who handle quite an array of scope of work, from greeting our customers to helping with the parking garage, as well as our parking garage systems. And with this reclassification, we're asking for a change of scope of work for our ambassador team to help more with our lost and found, to help additional with some security items, as well as to help with events and driving situations that would require them, of course, to have a change of scope. This is a supported reclassification from the union, and we're estimating just shy of around $50,000 for the remainder of this year with our entire ambassador team, which is about 18 individuals. that's what we're asking for tonight, is that reclassification and change. There would be no budget amendment. This is supported through the airport's budget and through the airport's enterprise fund budget, of course. Okay, we got everything. So,
Perfect. Appreciate it. Questions for Nick or his team? Councilor Carpenter.
This is less for Nick and more an editorial comment on reclasses. I think this committee sees too many, and I think like this in particular, which I'm supportive of, should be part of the budget process. And, you know, I think each year, each department should come to us in the budget process and tell us what you've changed and the impact on your department budget. And so I'm just saying this more editorially, or we, that's the right thing. And, you know, we should talk big picture, but once we approve your budget, you shouldn't have to keep coming back to us with the reclass. So there's some flaws to me in the reclass system that I think maybe there should be internal discussion around, you know, when should they come to us and when should they not, particularly if they're budget neutral and intended to be fairly budget neutral. So that's my editorial comment. It's a big change. It's not a big change. It's a group change, right? And so I think when you have that kind of reclass, it is more symptom of a budget item, not the money part, but just the restructure.
I definitely hear you, Councilor Carpenter, and we've been trying to, obviously across the city, whether it's enterprise fund or general fund, get more disciplined on this. And life marches on the 11 months in between, and we can't always predict evolutions that are needed in roles. And not speaking specific, sorry, we're going to talk about in general, not specific to the airport. Sometimes there's also things that come up that we work with our unions, of course, that midstream we realize, and one working with faith of making sure that work reflects compensation. And we might hit rough patches of hiring. We've seen this a lot in recycling, which we'll talk about upstairs at the council meeting tonight. And so sometimes I think we have to allow some level of flexibility while also juggling the discipline of this. And that's exactly the work I've asked the team to be focused on this year as department heads, is be really clear about the why on a reclass, being really clear on not adding work unless it's really part of a strategic just reimagining of the work itself, and not just these creeping reclasses that add to the budget. And I totally agree. We suddenly find ourselves a year later and added a lot to our overhead. Anything else on this item or reclassifications in general? Okay, is there a motion on this one?
I'll move the action on Senate.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Travers. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. All right, moving right along. Mission approved. We are now plenty of time. How remarkable. So item 5, which is a budget update. There's no action related to this item, but it is an update related to our work on fiscal year 27. And our CAO and Kevin Schaffel do a little bit of an overview on where we're at and our hard work over the last couple months.
You there? Yes, I am going to give us a little update on where we are in the FY 27 general fund budgeting process. We have previously talked in this meeting and also City Council that we are projecting a gap of $10 to $12 million in the general fund for next year. And we have been planning to use a balanced, multi-pronged approach to fill that gap of raising revenue, right-sizing government, and realizing strategic opportunities. The current situation is, after receiving detailed budgets, the forecasted initial gap has not changed. So it remains at $10 to $12 million. As a reminder, for those who are like former Councilor Sharon Busher and paying close attention, those amounts, or that gap amount of $10 to $12 million, does not include anything related to debt service or retirement. Those expenses have a specific dedicated funding source, one of our splinter taxes. And there was some confusion a couple of years ago when we talked about the gap, whether it included that or it does not. It does not, and it never has in this budget year. The good news is that we are currently forecasting that gap to shrink because we are filling it with proposed solutions in advance of our budget meetings in late April and early May. So jumping right into those solutions, this is a revised version of a chart that you have seen before, but I will draw your attention to the fact that it is now on 2 different pages. And that is not just because we had so many solutions we ran out of room. That is also because on this page, it is the solutions that are moving towards being more final, at least final towards the mayor's draft budget. These are the ones that we've talked about before, and we are planning to incorporate into the budget that will be presented here. So I'll talk about them. The first one is the increase of the 5-cent police and fire property tax that was passed by voters just last Tuesday. So thank you to everyone for that. The second one is consistently accounting for vacancy across our general fund departments. And this one has sparked a little bit of conversation. It is something that we have done longer than the 6 years that I have been at the city. We don't always talk about it a lot amidst all of our solutions. But what this really means is the way our budget is forecast, it's very detailed, and we have every single employee in the budget for 100% of the time. We know that people have lives and things don't always work out as we plan or hope, which we hope everyone would stay employed for an entire fiscal year. What the data shows us, however, is that a 5% vacancy rate is in line with our past practices, meaning we will not achieve more than 95% of kind of full employment. And so 5% of our salary and benefits budgeted numbers, we won't need, because we'll just have people who retire, who find other jobs, or for whatever reason decide to leave the city. I do want to note that this 5% does not apply to fire or police, but otherwise we do sort of take it off the top of general fund departments. The next one is another one we've talked a little bit about in this arena, and that is enhancing collections of money that is already owed to the city. This is not new money. This is money that, as of today, people already owe to us. And us getting more deliberate and also I've lost the word. Across the departments, we want to be more consistent. Thank you, both of you. We want to be more consistent in that approach. And so I have listed in the notes just some of the examples here of areas that we will be targeting, and we have a memo that goes into more detail should anyone want that. And then lastly, on this slide, we do still have a few sources of one-time revenues, a tiny bit of ARPA, a little bit of additional capital money last year in an effort to stretch our capital money as far as possible. We gave some money to parks and not to DPW, and both of those staff were engaging in capital work. So we will rectify that this year. And then a proposal we haven't talked about as much here is the $1.2 million in funds that will be added to the unassigned fund balance as a result of the positive FY25 audit. We are suggesting we utilize half of that in the FY27 budget, and half of that would stay. And we had previously explored use of what I was calling old leftover dedicated tax money in appropriate ways. And I want to clarify that at this point, we are not planning to use any of that dedicated tax money. The 1.1 million here, you can see where we're getting that. Moving on to the second sheet of budget solutions, you'll notice these ones are labeled for further discussion. So these ones are not as far along in the we definitely plan to use these category, but want to keep this conversation going. So at the top, we are still discussing with every general fund department how they can reduce expenses to the tune of $3 million overall. And I think it was Councilor Carpenter who previously mentioned in this meeting, really getting clear about what are our essential and core services, what do we need to have, and then what are things we might want to have, but we can't afford them now. And that's really what this exercise is about. The second item is the voluntary furlough program that you've heard about. And we are still working on that with HR and in discussions with AFSCME about exactly how that would work. But it would be voluntary, and there's just a few details to work out. The overall scope of the program has not changed since the last time we talked about it. Sale of city property. It was on the list, I took it off the list, it's back on the list. This is the beauty of getting the up close and very detailed view of solving the budget. It's back on because we originally were looking at, I don't know, many properties, let's say 10. And at first blush, it looked like all of them were complicated enough that we wouldn't realize revenue in FY27. And the mayor pushed us and said, you know, are there any that are less complicated? And there are two. One is 135 Brook Drive, and another is slightly more complicated, so we're not naming it yet, but we will be soon. And those two properties are less complicated than the others we were considering, and so those are still on this for further discussion list. They would both generate housing opportunities as well as a little bit of one-time money for FY27 and getting those properties back on the grand list. So adding revenue on an ongoing basis. And then every day we've got additional ideas that come on or could go off the list. And so I've listed some of those here. And these solutions at this point are just over $11 million. Want to talk just briefly about the proposed property tax rate. There are, this lists all of our splinter taxes. And I will not go through them in mind-numbing detail because I think Sharon Busher and I would be the only ones very interested in that. But a couple of things to note here, and one is at the very top, right under my green and purple, you'll see the grand list number. And last year it was 59.3, and for FY '27, it's looking like 58.1. That is almost entirely due to the loss of the business personal property tax. You'll see that the effect of that is, take for instance, the first tax rate here, the general city rate has stayed, it will stay at 19.32 cents. But the city will actually, we are forecasting, receive about $235,000 less in revenue because of the grand list going down. So I'm just pointing that out because that is not something we talk a lot about, the nuances of the grand list, but that's important here. Also, it is worth noting at the very bottom of the list, we talked earlier about retirement and debt service. Those rates go up or down depending on the need. This year, retirement happened to go down. As you can see, last year it was 19.74 cents. This year, we're forecasting it to be just over 18 cents. And that's because our market performance of our retirement fund did so well, we needed less money. Debt service, on the other hand, went from 13.65 cents to just over 15 cents because we needed more money to fund the debt service. And so you can see over here, this column on the right, they didn't exactly balance each other out. We had actually a bit more savings in retirement, but you can see those, you can see the effect here. It's also important because of some of the changes with the grand list to see here what someone who has a $353,000 assessed value, that is the current median, what they can expect to pay on the municipal portion of their property taxes next year. And that is looking to be a $191 increase and just over 6%. That does include and is in fact mostly the 5-cent increase on police and fire. And this is it, and we'll get to questions and discussion. Next steps. We have had a lot of engagement with city unions. We've had 3 calls with city employees, and we're about to have a 4th, and we'll keep talking in this venue. I will be sending out later this week dates and invitations for the detailed budget presentations that will take place the last week of April and the first week of May. And with that, unless there's anything for you,
No, covered it all, Catherine. Great, thank you. I'll probably jump in with any questions. And so we'll open it up for questions or comments from the board. Councilor Carpenter.
Couple different ones. On the vacancy computation, 2 comments. I do hope in police and fire, I mean, they'll have vacancies, right? I mean,
yes.
so that we still look at it, not that it's captured carefully, and if there's savings that they're not going to use, then I don't want us to automatically assume they need them. They need to be fully staffed, but I think it's important. The other thing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, so we have a vacancy, somebody leaves, you have to calculate it. I've heard inconsistent things about, well, how soon can you refill that position? And a couple times I've been told, well, we can't refill it until their time is used up. And I'm assuming that meant accrued vacation time. And I don't know if that's the policy. I'm not sure that it should be the policy. So I think it's just important, you know, and that obviously has value, I mean, it affects the budget, but I'm not sure the policy should be, we need to wait until they've used up all their time. So I don't know how you calculate it, but I guess I am asking, you know, legitimately, if a department has a vacancy and they need the position, they ought to be able to recruit for the position, even though in fact, that's gonna cost the department more. I mean, vacancies cost you money because you have vacation time, and I don't think we pay out sick time, but maybe we do.
Not generally, but it depends.
Yeah, so vacancies cost money, that's where I was going, and I hope appropriately we take that in effect so that we don't harm the department in their need to continue to recruit somebody. And that's particularly probably so when you lose a longtime person, which is exactly where you need fast recruitment. Oh, the other one was just the reduction in the grand list, and you don't have it submitted, but have you drilled down kind of where we've lost value? We've lost value in the grand list, that's what I heard you say. Where, what types of properties, where have we lost it? And there's probably some big ones in there, but maybe not. So I think that would be useful to have.
Excellent. I'll take a crack at that and then anything you want to add. The vacancy on police and fire, I'm really glad you brought this up because I may have inadvertently given the impression that we're not taking vacancy on that, and that is not what I meant to do. What I meant to say was, it's not just a straight 5%. You're exactly right. I work with both chiefs and the mayor, and we sit down and essentially almost go position by position and figure out when are the recruit classes gonna be. And so rather than being able to say just 5%, figure it out among your positions, we take a more nuanced approach, but you will definitely see vacancy savings budgeted in, and we can talk about that when we get to their budgets, how we've done that and if we all agree with that. It's a very interesting point about what you've heard around replacing vacant positions. And I believe that there is not a policy about waiting to recruit until someone's time is all used up, but that is a very helpful from a budget perspective practice that was put in place by a former CAO. And when I got here, I tried to disband it right away, but I see that it's still floating around somewhere. And so one of the things I really appreciate about this mayor is we've said, even in cases where we're saying non-union positions, we want the default to be hold that position open for 45 days. We've been very clear with the department heads, and maybe we could reiterate that every position is really unique. And so you're exactly right. There's some that, you know, we should have overlap, and we're working to, again, have sort of nuanced conversations about where can a position be held open and where do we really need to have someone sit with the existing employee if that's possible, and to pay those two positions and work that out. Lastly, the mayor just asked about the details for the reduction in the grand list, and I'm working that out with her, so I will come back and talk about that in a future meeting. Great.
And I will just add on, Catherine, that so a little bit more in the details on the vacancy. So I really appreciated every department head really looking, I don't even know what's thinner than a fine-tooth comb, but whatever that is, we're going even deeper, and everyone, including police and fire, have been looking at, as Catherine was saying, every individual position and where we can project forward into next year that might be open. So standard and consistency is really important. So that 45-day non-union hold the position open unless you can make the case that it really needs to be filled, is going to be the consistent expectation across the board, and everyone is on board with that in terms of department leadership. And beyond that, so we're trying not to confuse ourselves. It's not a full name. It's a hold open, which if you have a better term, let me know. But as you will see the details of the budget come forward, there are a handful of additional positions in various departments that we're considering holding open longer than 45 days because it's we can make a go of it with 1 or 2 quarters, or in some cases, the entire year, given the nature of that particular position. But that's what I mean by the fine-tooth comb, is that we're really trying to be almost a strategic surgical level down to that level, because we really want to be thoughtful and thorough. If there's reductions in other parts of city government, that we have truly done everything we possibly do to take advantage of vacancies without hampering the critical core essential operations of the city.
I'm fine with that policy. Just one other thing that I wanted, like, sometimes you have maybe this is on the upper level, but what the upper level would be a big salary, that you still want to you can hold it open for 45 days, but you still need to start the recruitment. And some of the things I've heard is, oh, we can't start recruitment. And if it's a position that takes 6 weeks to recruit for, then you want to start day 1, even if you say to the applicants, your job can't start for 2 months. Because sometimes you have applicants who might want a job and they don't mind waiting 2 months because they're in another job. So I just encourage us, even though you're consistent about the 45 days, to say, well, we still can recruit, we just can't hire, which is a different.
Yep, sure. Thank you. Other comments, questions? Councilor Barlow.
Yes. I had 2 questions. The first was about the slide on budget solutions the state plans to utilize under their raised revenue line. Why isn't property tax, overdue property tax included in that? I'm sure there's a good reason.
Space.
No, space. It absolutely, I almost mentioned it, Councilor Barlow. I appreciate that. It could include overdue property taxes and ambulance fees. So yes, I apologize. It was in a previous version, and given that it is our largest source of revenue, it was just inadvertent. So I apologize.
Not a problem. I thought there was some technical reason for it.
No, great
And
clarification.
actually, to that point, Councilor Barlow, we were just talking today. Today was the first day of our 3rd round, I think we're up to, of counselor, and we'll see tomorrow, but a counselor briefings on the budget confidentially as we continue to work in good faith with all of you. And one thing we was recommended by the counselor who attended today was that at a future date, probably towards the end of April, we should do a little bit of an update on just collections in general, because we've been hard at work already in this fiscal year, specifically on property taxes that are due to the city. And I think it would be a very strategic and important public conversation to have, so folks know that we are already hard at work on this, and we have more to do in the upcoming fiscal year 27 to just build out that a little bit of education.
Okay, excellent. And my second question was around, I know that like in prior budget years, there are certain variables that we have to take guesstimates on, like for instance, the cost of health insurance and things. And I'm just wondering how clear you think your picture is at this point in March of all of those variables, and could there be surprises either to the low or the high side of our current projections between now and the time we have to finalize it?
That is a great question. There are always surprises, but I will say we are certainly narrowing it in. We have final retirement data, and but we are, we've got until April 1st to finalize the grand list, so there's still, I think we're very close, but there's still a few weeks with that. And then health insurance is such a big cost, and we are torn between wanting to be as accurate as possible, and every month we're getting more information and then just needing to lock that down. And so by April 1st, there could also be a little bit of wiggle room on health insurance. But I think, excuse me, I think the coming to you now with this presentation, a lot more work and a lot more details have been reviewed at this point, considering compared to, I think I presented last about mid-January, and a lot has been nailed down in this time. So I am hesitant to say, but I sort of feel like we're at sort of, maybe then we were at 60% certainty, and maybe now we're at like 85.
I don't want to jinx us either. So
Me neither.
I shouldn't ask the question.
This is the thing we should also just clarify, because we talk about it sometimes and not every time. The nature of a self-insured plan is a much different animal to estimate for budgeting purposes than what most people experience out in a plan that, I don't know what you call the other plans, like more regular or routine plans where you have a fixed cost and you budget for it and it's still usually a double-digit increase and you still need to really do serious healthcare reform in general because it's crushing every employer. But the nature of budgeting with a self-insured plan is it's just a very different animal, and so we really have to eventually pick a time to lock in, but doing so in a place that's really informed based on this current workforce with this current number of folks who are on dependents that are on, et cetera. So it's just different, which is, I just want to back that up. It's not that we're not trying, and you all know this, but just for the public, it's not that we don't know what the number is. It's just the monthly up and down nature of a self-insured plan and trying to not under budget, which would be the worst scenario, or way over budget, which would also not be a great scenario. Councilor Berlin, do you have a question before we go to Councilor Carpenter?
I think you said this before, but I just want to, I understand the nature of union contract on that, but I did understand that you were looking at, or gonna be looking at other models that we can't switch overnight from self-insured, but there may be other models in the longer term that we'll need to look at, and it would take concurrence from our unions, but I'm hoping we're gonna be getting guidance and spending some time on that.
Emphasis on long term. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
fundamentally, it is a bargainable item that we would have to bargain with all four of our unions over the lifetime of those life cycles of those contracts. And in the time being, there are not a lot of options in a rural state like Vermont that would be significantly enough in terms of better savings. Unfortunately, with other plans that are out there that are those regular plans, and I don't know all this, you can turn in my head sometime, the non-self-insured plans that are out there. So I think maybe several years ago that might have been something that might be more advantageous somehow, but now we're at a point where all the costs are so high that there really is no golden solution somewhere. And it's frustrating. Like, this is again why whenever I talk about it, I remind us that we really need some serious reform on the state level and certainly on the federal level, because we're really kind of out of options. And I wouldn't want to change the quality plan that we have with our unionized folks and non-union folks for something that is not going to really save us money in the long run and might actually be less in terms of quality and coverage for our hardworking workforce. Other questions and comments? We have 11 minutes. Councilor Trapp.
Just a handful of things in no particular order. And again, thank you for continuing to come back to us with this information and the transparency with which you're presenting it. One item that I want to mention is that, and we've talked about it before, but at the moment, under our ordinances, our inflated gross receipts values are scheduled to sunset at the conclusion of this fiscal year. And we continue to present budgets that assume that the council is going to take action to extend that sunset, but we haven't done that yet. We have not seen a proposed amendment to our ordinances to eliminate that sunset. I think I personally have some concerns about commitments that were originally made, particularly to our business community, which we continue to hear from as continuing to find some successes, but also some struggles in the current climate. And I do think that that's an important item that we're going to have to address here. I think somewhat related to that is, to the extent the more than $100 million loss in the brand list value is attributable to the business personal property line items no longer being on the brand list. I would be curious knowing what the impact of the sunset of that is on our business community in particular. Who has been paying taxes on the business personal property tax? How does the elimination of that from the brand list impact their tax bills? And then I say related to the gross receipts tax, how does that interchange with those businesses that have been paying that inflated gross receipts tax in recent years? I would be curious to learn more about what the all-in number is in terms of money already owed to the city. We're hoping to collect another $1 million. Maybe this has been discussed in other funding was even discussed tonight, I missed it. But I just, in terms of total amount of overdue parking tickets, total amount of overdue gross receipts, total amount of overdue building permits and property taxes, I'd be curious to know what the breakdown of that is, what the total number is. And then learning more about specifically what the plan is to secure an additional $1 million out of those unpaid taxes. I've said it before, I'll say it again, that seems like a high number to me. I think that if it was easy, we would do it, right? And I think especially as we're looking at a budget where we're potentially having to cut back services from areas that historically would be responsible for these enhanced collections, that it seems like a very aspirational number. I want to make sure that we're zeroing in on that particular item. An additional question, I know we're going to continue to talk about that, so I'm not necessarily seeking answers this evening, is I'm curious to the extent we're planning on using any monies from the unassigned fund balance, whether or not we've had any communications with the city's rating agencies. We've had really positive updates recently with respect to the city's bond rating being improved, but we know that is in pretty significant part attributable to the level of our unassigned fund balance, to assigned funds, and I would want to be very sure that our use of additional unassigned funds is not in any way potentially jeopardizing the progress that we've made on that front. And then just two other items, just briefly, just to sort of name them, and then we can continue the discussion. I appreciate that we have walked back the projection on the sale of city property. I think, as we mentioned, it would potentially be difficult for us to go through that process, identify the property, go through the sale, and actually realize those funds in FY27. I think given that FY27 is kicking off on July 1 and it's already March 9th, I do still question even whether this number is going to be something that we can realize in FY27. So I just want to be careful about our relying on these numbers in terms of landing on a balanced budget. And then I think the final thing that I'll mention, I appreciate very much our looking into staff's flexibility with considering something like the voluntary furlough program. But until sort of signing off on that, I think we'll need to understand more about what the impact of that may actually be, particularly on how residents experience their interaction with the city. If we're having to close down the clerk's office on Fridays, or the library isn't available for the same number of hours, and so on. I'm making that up right now. That's just speculation, right? As to some of the things that may be at issue here, depending on who volunteers for the program. I question whether or not the loss in some of those services is worth the bang for the buck here. We're talking about $200,000 here, and if the impact of that voluntary furlough program is going to be negative on how folks interact with and experience the city, I don't, at this point, I question whether or not $200,000 is worth the bang for the buck. But I'm open to it. I'd like to just learn more about who's actually volunteering and what the impact will be on city services. That's my list for this evening. Thank you for allowing me the time.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. I'm going to just start with some brief responses. So first, back to gross receipts. It is my intention as mayor to not sunset. This is something we've gone back and forth since I became mayor. And it's largely because the budget gap is so sizable that I really think we need all the solutions on the table. And if we do sunset, meaning end the 0.5% increase to the gross receipts rate, that's almost $1 million more to our budget gap. And that adds to the $10 to $12 million gap we have already. And I am deeply concerned around more further cuts, not only within services that our city residents and visitors rely on, but those businesses themselves rely on, that we have carefully, we've had a conversation earlier on community safety in particular. We have carefully invested and right-sizes our community safety response that directly benefits our business community. And I would be cautious before considering taking that offline without some other way to kind of backfill that in the same breath, in the same conversation, because it sets us up for even harder times ahead. So I do hope that folks will reconsider and be thoughtful about that piece of it. In terms of the collections, I'll come right back to you, Council Carpenter. In terms of collections, there's actually a much larger conversation, as I said earlier, will come in late April with more specificity on the work we've been doing already, including very sizable, well more than $1 million of what is actually owed to the city across the board between property taxes, parking tickets that have not been collected, late fees on those, ambulance fees, et cetera. It's pretty comprehensive, and there was a period of time during COVID, and we will get more into it in April, that the city wasn't collecting. And so that is a very informed estimate by our Department of Finance and Administration of that $1 million alone. It also includes looking at staff capacity and perhaps using a debt collection service, because there's only limited, and really cutting the numbers, right, between juggling statute of limitations, which applies to some of these, and making sure we collect on some pieces that are owed, and make sure that we publicly change course and make sure people know that what is owed to the city is an issue of fairness we will collect on. The property piece, I heard on your feedback, this is originally why I brought this. Said we should put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off. 135 Brook Drive, which we did put on, is in the new north end. It is a vacant lot, literally nothing on it, no major complications to it. It sits in between actual built homes out there. And we are appraising it right now in order to accelerate being able to just put it on the market. I feel very confident with that, and these have been vetted by our planning department and CEDO. So the other one, TBD, would be brought forward for the same exact reasons, that we are confident around the sale, because it is literally, it's not even built to build, it's flat to build. It's ready for a house to be put on, or some sort of housing that we need in our other, for our other purposes in the city. And then finally, I just want to clarify on the voluntary furlough, we cannot ask people to sign up for that ahead of time. We have put out a proposal of sorts. We had an anonymous survey. We're estimating between $200,000 to $300,000 or so on savings based on an initial uptake. In my mind, that's 2 to 3 positions easily that we would not have to consider cutting otherwise. So I want to make sure we have all options on the table. It shows good faith to our unions and to our staff. They really are trying to get creative. And our original proposal on voluntary furlough has a minimum of 40 hours for the entire year that someone could sign up and help in a small way. And that's 40 hours for the entire year. So I think if we give opportunities for people to really embrace that we're in this together to balance this budget and can save some of the services and cuts if we can help us weather us getting us through, it's certainly a policy idea very worthy of putting forward. Did you want to add Ben had a very long list. Sorry, Councilor Travers had a long list. There's a couple of things I didn't address, and then we'll come back to Councilor Carpenter.
I would just say, we are in contact with Moody's about the unassigned fund balance. We could talk more about that. And otherwise, I think you can.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Councilor Carpenter.
I think Councilor Chavez asked about, I think he asked about understanding the Burlington business tax.
Oh.
And actually, so that's why I went relative to the local options increase. And even if this isn't necessarily public, I am now curious whose taxes went down because they lost the personal property tax, and who went up because of the local options tax, and how much overlap was there? Was there a group of people that actually had their taxes lowered last year, and it might have gone up? So I just think that would be useful information. The other thing I was just going to mention in terms of the collections, particularly on the property tax side, you just made the comment about debt collection agency, which rings harshly in people's minds. There's a very specific way you collect taxes, and it's not harsh at all. It's really, I mean, maybe the person's circumstances got a thing attached to it, but it's not a harsh process at all. So I just want us to be cautious that there's very laid out processes to collect. It's not like some guy with a dark hat knocking on your door, and it's not like that. So I just want to make our terminology
Yes,
maybe
of course.
debt collection agency is not the right term. I don't know what the term
Right,
is.
I apologize for that.
No,
Whatever the agency is.
No, it's actually correct. We are gonna pursue a debt collection agency for things like ambulance fees or potentially gross receipts. And so that is true, and it is also true, a debt collection agent would never touch property taxes
Yeah.
because we don't want people to lose their homes and because things like we have to give a certain amount of notice, we have to allow people to enter into a payment plan for 2 years. If it went to tax sale, they still have another year to get their home back. And so I really appreciate that, Councilor Carpenter, in case someone who is behind on their property taxes is looking at this, like, we're not selling that. That debt is not a collection agency debt.
Well, and this is, may sound harsh, but I think some observation of getting that word out in the sense because sometimes people unrealistically hold on to property and don't pay taxes. And now is the time to sell. And that's hard, but, and the degree to which people can get that concept that maybe you do have to sell your house or your business because in next year they're gonna come and they're entitled, or we are entitled to it.
I appreciate that. It's part of our blighted property response that we have brought across the department, including DFA and DPI together, because they're, I mean, surprised to no one, some of our blighted properties or underutilized properties are on multiple lists. They're on multiple lists related to being either vacant or back in property taxes or an issue with water or sewer. So very much heard on that part. And Councilor Carpenter, to your business tax and gross receipts, we can certainly look into it. I just want to remind folks that gross receipts is a consumption tax that's collected not by all businesses, but the proper way to collect that really is at the point of sale, because that's what it is. And the business tax is a different kind of tax, but I wonder if we can, everything is more complicated than that, but Catherine has heard that we're requesting, we'll do our best to get that information. I know that it's 6:03 p.m. and seeing if there are any other burning questions, we will keep updating folks. And as I said, councilors will benefit from further dialogue this week with confidential briefings because there is personal related information in those meetings later this week. And we will continue to update in the public within the next month, another update as things get a little bit more finalized, at least from the mayor's perspective. So not seeing any further hands or glares or just looks. This is an item with no action, so we will move on to our final item, which is adjournment, and we have no further business, so I will adjourn Finance. Go forward. Very much.